Thank you very much for inviting me here, and I'm proud and happy to be talking to you today about OpenCorporates, the company I founded about 3.5 years ago. I've been involved full-time in open data now for over 5 years. The UK has been working, UK government has been working on open data for most of that time. The good news is that we are just at the beginnings of open data. We are a little bit like in electronics, we're still in the transistor age as far as open data goes. So there's still plenty of time to overtake the UK by quite a long way as far as open data goes. So I want to talk to you today about OpenCorporates, what we're doing, why open data is fundamental to what we're doing, and what the benefits and why it's important. So we normally describe OpenCorporates as the largest open database of companies in the world. We currently have over 80 million companies in a little over 100 jurisdictions from the UK to India, from California to Florida to Greenland to Pakistan to Luxembourg, all sorts of countries around the world. We think of this database as the underlying data set of company data. My background actually is a journalist, but I started as a journalist, did a maths degree actually, but started as a journalist and then ended up running companies, running magazine publishing companies. And as a CEO of a company and founder of companies in the past, I have bought companies, I have sold companies, and when you do that, you look at companies in a different way. What are the assets of a company? Do you want to do business with this company? This sort of information about these, about all the basic information about companies, is the underlying ground truth, if you like, the underlying facts on which the whole of the corporate world is built. Just in the same way as maps are built today on spatial databases. So we see this as being fundamental to business, not just open data business, but a business of all sorts. And what we do is we collect data from different government repositories from around the world, mainly corporate registers, that is the official registers of companies, and and also from regulatory data as well, regulatory websites. We take it from these different websites, and instead of it being in these separate silos, just isolated data sets, we combine this in one place. And by doing this, and by linking these data sets together, you start to see a much truer, greater picture. So many of these data sets are really very important. Is this company that has approached you still in business? What are the financials of this company that you are considering working for? Has this company been given a winding up notice, a notice to close down? These are really critical issues, but it's quite difficult to find this information because you need to go to 5, 10, 20 different websites to find this out. So one of the things that we do, one of the things that makes OpenCorporates different, and when we started this about 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, nobody understood this, which in a startup is a good thing. To be doing something as a startup which most other people don't understand is a good thing. It shows that you have a chance of succeeding. So we decided to do something quite different from anybody else. We didn't think about Mitsubishi or Siemens or Vodafone or BP and tried to look at it from that perspective. What we looked at is all the legal entities that make up a corporate group. In fact, all the legal entities in any single country, any single jurisdiction. So when you work for a company, it's not the company, it's not the name you think, you don't actually work for a name. You don't have an employment contract with the name Mitsubishi, you have it with a specific company in that group. When government gives a contract to, let's say, Vodafone, it doesn't give a contract, it doesn't have a contract with that idea, that overall group Vodafone. It has it with a specific legal entity. A legal entity is what lawyers mean by a company. It is something with a distinct legal personality, separate from the owners and separate from the managers. And that's why we have companies in the first place, because it's really useful to be able to have something that's separate. It's really useful to be able to have something enter into contracts, employment contracts, contracts for leasing offices, to be able to have assets and liabilities. This is the basis on which our modern corporate world exists. So we started off at this level and decided to work our way up. So when we look at something like Trafigura as a company in the extractives industry, in the oil industry, it's mainly in Europe, but also it's active in Africa and other places. And you can actually see all the companies that are called Trafigura or were called Trafigura. And we take this information from company registers, from corporate registers. We put this in one place, we clean it up a little, we normalize it. Everything we do is automatic. We don't do any manual imports. We write code to pull things in automatically. We're actually over 100 jurisdictions now and adding more all the time. We take the information, for example, what is a company number? So what we call a company number is the identifier given by the register for that in the jurisdiction where it is incorporated. The status, that's used. The word status is not used in that many places. Often it's status, current status. It is live. It is all sorts of other things. The incorporation date, founding date, registration date. All of these things we normalize and put into a standard form. We make it searchable across all of these jurisdictions. Now, in a country like the UK, that's not that groundbreaking. It's very easy to search the UK company register. It always has been. But actually, if you're in the US, where we have something like, we have about 40 of the states in the US, there are no American companies. There are only companies created by the individual states. So to be able to search across to be able to search across 40 US states, that's actually quite groundbreaking. You don't know whether this company is registered in Delaware or in California or in Florida or in Michigan. So how do you do that? Do you have to go to each website and ask that? Sometimes the searches doesn't work very well. Even in the UK, where you can search for it, you have to do two different searches. Search for companies that are currently live, and search for companies that were dissolved more than a year or two ago. Sometimes you can't search by their previous names. The companies change names all the time. So just doing this one thing turns out to be incredibly useful. And then we do things like we find intelligence in the information. So a common example is branches. A branch is not just not what we think of as a building, for example. A branch is a registration of a company's presence in another jurisdiction. So, for example, Barclays Bank has many subsidiaries, but also Barclays Bank itself does business in the state of New York, and it has to register with the state of New York to say that. Now that seems simple, that seems fairly straightforward. This has been known about for a long time. So what did we do that's different? We said, surely this information could do more than this. So we match these foreign branches to the home companies. And because of that, we know who the CEOs are, for example, because if you do business in New York State, you have to declare who the CEO is. If you're a Cayman Islands company, you don't have to declare who the directors are, unless you also, that company does business in the UK, in which case you need to disclose to the UK Company Register who the directors are. So by tying this information, you get a more of a 360-degree view of a company. And that's what we're all about, is providing this 360-degree view of a company. You can also find many, many cases where the local office thinks the company is still in business, but actually the company has been dissolved. So those are the sorts of things that we can do by putting this in one place. We can find intelligence, and we can find data quality problems. The other thing that makes OpenCorporates different from anything else that has gone before is that we're open. What do we mean by open? We mean that everything is free on the web, of course, but also when you are looking at that web, when you are taking information from that website, actually there is an open license which allows you to reuse the data also. Now we think that open is really important in the modern world. It's important not, because actually if you don't have open, then you have restrictions, and those restrictions make life very difficult. It means you have to ask permission all the time. That introduces friction. It means that instead of just going off and doing something, coming up with a new idea, a new business idea, innovating, it means that first you need to ask permission for the data. First, then typically you need to pay for the data. But in order to pay for their data, you need to have a successful business model. So the idea of people coming up with of new ideas at low cost and of very few barriers, open makes that possible. If there is somebody has an idea for taking, for example, the farm subsidy data and understanding where opportunities are for agriculture in business, then if it's open data, then they can just come up with the idea, come up with the execution, and then do it. Otherwise, they need to come up with first a business model, create a customer base, understand all of these different problems, get lawyers involved, and this sort of stuff becomes incredibly difficult and expensive. So if you're an innovator, and this is my third company now I've created, then you want as few barriers as possible. You want to make it as easy for people to take data. Data is what we all live on these days. These are entirely driven by data. Every time we use a website these days, it is driven by data. Every time we telephone a call center, it is driven by data. Data is the underlying, the underlying fuel for the entire economy today. So what we want to do is we want people to be able to use that as easily as possible. So for innovation, to me, it is I'd call a no-brainer. It is really simple. For competition, actually, you want to compete. You want a variety of different companies competing with different business models, different ways of doing things. You want all those opportunities. That is the fundamentals of the market, the system. You want all of those opportunities that could be taken to be taken. And yet, if you have closed data, if you make particularly government public data difficult to get hold of, and particularly if it's sold, then you are reducing competition. If you are a local government, can you get the central government information that you need to be able to provide context? Can you get the information from around the surrounding local government areas to understand what happens with the air pollution on this road, for example, as it goes from one part of the country to another, to understand about environmental impacts, to understand about food delivery systems, to understand about the movement of labor and the different industries? Can you do this with very little friction, making it very easy? If you have to set up, traditionally what would have happened is that government would have set up these would have been done with bilateral agreements or multilateral agreements to share the data. But by publishing it in the open, then you are making that easy for people to use and easy for people to experiment with as well and to find new things. And fundamentally, there's a quote that is sometimes misattributed to Thomas Jefferson, saying that information, if I remember it rightly, it's basically information is the raw material for democracy. And these days, I think we'd be talking about data. The data that governments have describes the world in which we live, the economy, the banks, the geography, the environment, the politics, the companies. This is the world in which we live, and it is all described by data. If we, in democratic societies, don't have access to that data, then we don't have a proper democracy. If that data is restricted to just a few small, powerful actors, then we undermine our democracy from the beginnings. And I think that from a business point of view, there are a lot of people wanting to open up business data for lots of different reasons, and and they're good reasons as well. To understand about who you work for, to understand about how companies are connected to governments, about who is getting the contracts, to understand about who is lobbying for different things, to understand about corruption, to try to stop corruption. Lots of good reasons for this, but actually it's fundamental for business too. If I'm going to do a contract with another company, if my company is going to do a contract with another company, who am I doing business with? If government is going to give a contract for over there to cleaning up an environmental damage, are they also at the same time finding that same company over there for causing environmental damage? Are they giving money to companies that are connected with organized crime? Are they giving money to companies that is being done for sanctions busting, for example? Who are you doing business with? It's the fundamental question that everybody in business asks all the time, and that government should be asking too. And the G8, these actually, when you read the G8 Open Data Charter, these are exactly the reasons why the G8 Open Data was signed, and what they resolved to do was to make information open data by default, to say that it's not just quantity, it's also quality as well. What data are you producing? Is it the data that we need? This information should be a license that's usable by all. It's important as well for governance, so that we can strengthen our democracies. And it's important also for innovation. Now when those were signed, and I know some of the people involved in getting the G8 Open Data Charter agreed by the members. Those were not easy things to do. Today, now, particularly to this audience, those seem simple, seem obvious even. But actually, that shows just how far we have come. But even now, there's the G8. There are the things that they have agreed. How much progress have we made? We still have most of the critical data sets in those G8 open data companies, in those G8 open data countries, not yet open. The critical data that we need that underpins everything else is not yet open. This, for example, is the area that we focus on. Can you get hold of the company data? The list of companies that exist in the country, and the basic information about them. So the UK, I'm proud to say, is leading. It currently has 90 out of 100 on the metric that this is a website and scores that we do in conjunction with the World Bank. It currently has 90 out of 100. We believe that by April next year, it should be at 100 out of 100. It has announced that in the second quarter of next year, every single piece of data that it holds will be free and made available under an open license. Every single filing, and we're talking about tens and tens of millions, every single filing, every single piece of data, the information about not just the directors, which is currently available, the mortgages, the charges, the annual reports, all of this information will be free and open. But there are many countries, including, unfortunately, Japan, where this information just isn't available. In some cases, it is because the registers haven't been digitized in some developing countries. In some cases, like Spain, it is because you can't even search to see if a company exists without paying money. Now, of course, we're talking about open here, as though it was obvious, as though it was the right thing to do, which is why we should do it. But most people don't care about open. When you walk down the street in Tokyo, when you walk down the street in London, people aren't, worrying about whether the government's data is open enough. But that's not the point in a way. They also don't care about other fundamentals that drive our lives. They don't care about those protocols such as TCP/IP, the DNS system, security protocols, and so on, which are so fundamental to our lives. The fact that they are not worrying about open all the time does not mean that it isn't important. It just means that they take these things for granted. They will worry. When in the UK, actually now you can just get transport information just like that. You're starting to be able to get map information. You're starting to get company information. You're starting to get land ownership information just like that. Means that their lives will be improved in all sorts of different ways. Take that away, they would notice. But making that available, they just think that that is an improvement of society, and that is fine. Improving people's lives is a good reason for doing things. There's another reason why people do care about open, though. We think that open has a secret weapon which isn't used nearly as often as it should be, particularly in the business world. The thing about open is there's real quality benefits to doing open. We think that open is fundamentally better quality than closed. Let me give you some examples. So we've been dealing in this in many different areas, from local data to dealing with the existing business information providers, many of whom are now clients. So these are ones I'm sure that those of you who work day to day in data will be familiar with. Accuracy. Is what somebody has somebody or something given, is that the truth? Now, when you have proprietary closed data sources, there are two problems. Firstly is, for example, in filings for financials, their annual reports, the data is typically rekeyed. When you rekey it, you introduce errors. Also, it's closed, so that means that you don't have that many eyeballs. You don't have many people seeing it. There's this expression, all bugs are shallow given enough eyeballs. So if you have a lot of people looking at it, you get lots of people finding lots of different errors. And people lie all the time. When people are saying, this is these are our financials, actually to be able to have this in data sets which a small number of people are looking at in a particular context, that makes that really easy. So putting things in public is a really good way of knowing that, of getting the data quality up. There are lots of gaps in the data because it's so expensive. If you're talking about rekeying the data, you're talking about having a limited number of users, then the cost of data entry is high. It's spread over a limited number of users, and so you only do the bare minimum. The granularity is particularly poor. So many of these systems many of the proprietary systems have been going for 5, 10, 15, 20, even 50 years. And so their business models, their data models and their systems were invented in days when memory and storage was really expensive. And so they just stored the basic minimum. They don't have good data. There are no good feedback mechanisms when you have closed. You don't have, how do you report something as being wrong when you have this? How does it get fed back? How do you know that that's been corrected? This is the critical one, we think, which is that the data is often what we call black box data. So when, for example, you buy some information from a proprietary provider like Dun & Bradstreet and saying, oh, the parent of this company is this company over there, then you just have to take it on trust. You don't know where they got that information from. You don't know when they got that information from. You don't know whether it was a public source or whether it was modeled, and you just have to trust it. Now that's really problematic. As a journalist, I know that if I wanted to go to print with something, I wanted to know exactly where it came from and whether it was true, because otherwise I would be at the wrong end of a libel suit. But the problem is because where they get this data from, either because they don't want you to say, hey, wait a minute, we can just get that data directly, or they don't want to admit that they got it from sometimes dubious sources, they don't do that. And that limits its usefulness and how much you can trust it. And then finally, these data sets, proprietary data sets, are isolated. They use proprietary identifiers, which you can't use in other contexts. The licenses prevent it being combined with other data and being made more useful. The two best ways of getting high quality data, one is to make them public, the other is to combine them with other data sets, particularly data sets from a completely different domain, a completely different area. And so if you can't do that, which you can't in most of these cases, you don't get those data quality benefits. So what we're doing, and I'll quickly whiz through, as well as collecting all this basic information about companies, our eventual target is every single piece of company-related public data in the world. So everything that governments publish, whether it is court records, whether it is trademarks, whether it is procurement data, or environmental citations, or licenses, and so on, we want to have that and match that to the relevant company. We've already got millions of these pieces, millions of this data. For example, WIPO trademarks, filings from the SEC, data from the Federal Reserve. This here, which you can see on our site, this is a map of Goldman Sachs, of the Goldman Sachs corporate network, which we got in part from the US government Federal Reserve. And actually, there's a bit down there which you can't see, which is from New Zealand shareholding register, from the New Zealand Companies House. So by combining this data, we get a much better data set. We're currently working to pull in every single bank license in the world, so we want to know every single bank that exists in the world. And we're also working on business licenses, on data about NGOs and non-profits, on government gazettes, and on trademarks. We're driven by where our customers want, but also where there's structural information, such as parent-child, parent-subsidiary information, and also on things which we think are interesting. We have an innovative business model. We are a for-profit company, but we strongly believe in the public good. And so we have a cross-subsidy model. So everything on the web is free. You can use OpenCorporates without registration. You can use it without charge. Everything on the web is free. If you want the underlying data, you can also have that, but it's on what is known as a share-alike license. Share-alike is a term from open source, which means that it can be free. It should be free and open. But if you use it, then the product of it must also be free and open too. And so if you are, that allows people to use it freely. But it also means that if you have a private database or a proprietary database and you want that information, then you pay for it to have that share-alike license removed. Dun & Bradstreet, who are a client, for example, do not want to open up their entire database simply because they've bought some resources, because they've incorporated some data from OpenCorporates in it. Again, making everything free and open improves the quality and gives us efficiencies of scale, and there is no black box data. Every single piece of data we have in there, we know where it came from and when we got it, and that is made clear to the users. Finally, this is some examples of who's using our data, who's buying data from us. These are clients who pay for the data. World Bank, we partner with a number of different projects, but they also have bought data from us. LinkedIn buy data from us, use our API. Dun & Bradstreet, Stripe, big payment provider in the US, other credit reference agencies. We've just done some work for the UK government, for the Cabinet Office. This is now a profitable business that's worked not just based on open data, but producing open data, and where the fundamentals are all about being open. Thank you.